The Sherpa Screening Room is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks, which can be heard on podcast apps everywhere, and the Sherpa-lution YouTube page. It's where you'll hear from creators from many fields from all over the world. Now, we take you to the Sherpa Chalet, where your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, awaits you. Kinda like how I'm waiting to get paid for this.
Welcome to the Season 13 finale of the Sherpa's podcast picks, where we're proud to present another episode of the Sherpa Screening Room. Today's guest is true crime author Delaney Bartlette, who is here to discuss her newest book, The Dumond Affair. This book discusses a serial killer, a presidential candidate, and a pizza parlor full of demonic possession. So please don't confuse it with how the Sherpa spends his vacations.
Coming to you from Sherpa Chalet in beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's time for entertainment interviews in the Sherpa Screening Room. Grab an aisle seat and a bucket of popcorn, but don't crunch too loud or you'll miss the show. Now, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room. It is a presentation of the Sherpa's podcast picks, and you are listening to the kind of stuffed up voice of me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from Sherpa-lu Studios, here in the Sherpa Chalet, high on top of Mount Podcastia, where I get to overlook millions and millions of podcasts that are out there. And this isn't one of those. When we do the Sherpa Screening Room, we get to talk to the creators, the singers, the dancers, the actors, the authors, the directors, and the writers. And we get to talk to another true crime writer. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode where we got to speak to another true crime writer, B.R. Bates. And this week will not disappoint. This is our season finale. And her name is Delaney Bartlette, and she has written a book called The Dumond Affair. And I got to tell you, rebels, for a true crime book, this has got everything. It's got a serial murder, it's got an actual presidential candidate, and it's got a pizza parlor. So yeah, I don't think you're going to get too much more than that out of most of your true crime stories. And I got to sit down with Delaney Bartlette, the author, to get to know her and talk about her podcast and talk about this book, which is really wild. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think it's something that you will really be fascinated, especially if you love a good true crime story. She's coming to us from Arkansas, and you're going to love what she has to say. And we didn't even cover all the crazy stuff about it. I think we just even captured a handful of it. So if you want a little sampling of it, have a listen now. It's my conversation with Delaney Bartlette, the author of The Dumond Affair. Hello, the rebels. We are here in the Sherpa Screening Room. It's true crime time once again, and I am joined by a lady named D.R. Bartlette. She has written a book that's just come out called The Dumond Affair, How Lies and Politics Freed a Killer. She's coming to me from her home in Arkansas, and we're going to get to know her, and we're going to hear a little more about this book. And believe me, this is a story you guys may or may not believe, but it actually happened. So Delaney, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, so we were just talking before, and you actually used to have a YouTube channel called The Murder Nerd.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I still have it. I just haven't posted in a while because I've been working on the book.
Yeah. I would imagine writing a book and keeping up a YouTube channel, that's pretty much burning the candles on both ends.
Yeah, and I have a regular job too, so.
Yeah, because, the paycheck thing, that's,
Right, gotta pay the rent.
Not all of us need that, right? But most of us do. So, obviously, I'm going to guess there's been this lengthy fascination with true crime.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I kind of inherited it. My grandmother was more into like just crime, like fictional crime. And I would watch crime shows with her, like Quincy and stuff like that. And so I just kind of have always been fascinated by it. And it just gradually evolved into true crime because I got very interested in and fascinated by the science, particularly forensic science. And so that's what kind of led me to true crime.
It's funny because that question that I always tend to ask people who love it, like what is it that you love about it? And I never get the same answer from everybody. It's so intricate. Some people like the psychology, some people like the science, some people just like the thrill of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things about it. For some people, it's like the mystery, solving the puzzle of who
Right.
did it. Yeah, the psychology is really fascinating. For some people, it's about justice. They're fascinated by these stories and how the victims were able to get justice or not, as the case may be.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of aspects to it that make it fascinating for a lot of people.
And you said that you had written a book before this book. That was a fictional book.
Yes, that's right. I wrote a short novel called The Devil in Black Creek.
Aha. Well, do you want to tell me what that's about?
Sure, it's set in the 1980s and it's very sort of Stephen King style, Stranger Things style. 13-year-old girl who, a new preacher moves to town and there's mysterious goings on and she stumbles upon something terrible, but no one will listen to her. And so, yeah, it's kind of a sort of a throwback thriller, if you will.
And it's interestingly enough, I know the new book actually references the 80s too. You tend to have you're drawn to that era.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I was a teenager in the 80s, so if that tells you how old I am. But it's just a really interesting period of time in the sense of it was kind of in that weird donut hole where a lot of things were moving to digital, from film or magnetic tape or, whatever the previous medium had been, but people weren't archiving anything yet. So
Right.
it's really difficult to find a lot of news clips and television shows and just all kinds of media. There's just this kind of weird donut hole in the 80s and early 90s that makes it really difficult.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't think you know this, but you're actually talking to somebody who actually had an 80s music podcast for a couple of episodes with a former 80s music DJ in Australia. He was my co-host. So
That sounds awesome.
I get where you're coming from here.
I'm kind of a metalhead myself, but I'm all over the place, really.
So, all right, so we've got to get into this book because this is like the kind of plot that movies are made out of, really political thrillers. And, I was reading more and more, and I was like, okay, I think Delaney's going to have to explain this to me so we kind of understand.
If you tried to pitch this as a script, they would say, this is too crazy. There's too much. This is just unbelievable.
Okay, so why don't we start from the basic core of the plots? This way we won't give away too many spoilers either.
Sure.
Okay. So first, this was a guy who killed two people.
Well, he killed a total of 3 people.
Okay.
He killed one person before he committed the crime that's at the core of the Dumond affair that he got sent to prison for.
Okay.
So I'll call that sort of the original crime, but he had already murdered someone. He had committed sexual assault against multiple women. But his sexual assault of a girl named Ashley Stevens is sort of the primary crime at the center of the story.
Okay. And this was before the Clinton presidency, or this was?
That's right. This was while Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas.
Okay.
And Ashley Stevens was a distant cousin, a distant relative, like a third or fourth cousin or something like that with Bill Clinton.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. And then obviously he didn't get any jail time. I guess he was freed because was there some political maneuvering going on?
Yeah, there was a whole decade of political maneuvering. Kind of in a nutshell, his wife was just an absolute force. Her name was Dusty Dumond.
Okay.
And she was just an absolute force trying to get him freed. She was convinced he was innocent. And she was in real tight with the evangelical community in Arkansas, which at that time was the most powerful political bloc in the state. It's still pretty powerful.
Okay.
And so because the victim, Ashley Stevens, was related to Bill Clinton, she basically began to cook up this conspiracy theory that her husband, Wayne Dumond, was really innocent and that Bill Clinton had done all these things, including sent some thugs to go castrate Wayne and railroad him and imprison him. And, this poor innocent man, victim of the Clintons. And so by the time Mike Huckabee became governor, which was thanks to the huge dragnet of the Whitewater investigation, by the way,
right.
He repaid his old pal, Reverend J. Cole, by essentially working behind the scenes illegally to get the parole board to let Wayne Dumond get paroled.
Okay, before I ask any more questions, I'm going to retract my statement on movie. I'm going to say miniseries because
Yeah.
it's really got a lot of characters going on in here. And something that actually happened too, which is even scarier, I think.
Yeah. There are so many players. I mean, there's Wayne, there's his wife Dusty, there's the crazy preacher, which that's how I first kind of came into the story. Was we had this preacher that lived here in my part of the state in Northwest Arkansas, a man named J. Cole, who was the best way to describe him is like a proto Fred Phelps. He was always doing these crazy stunts and putting these like weirdly creepy commercials on Saturday morning cartoons and like starting beefs with the high school kids, and just like he was kind of a local, I don't want to say celebrity, but it was kind of like the local thing to yank J. Cole's chain because he was just so easy to piss off, basically.
Okay. So he was a man about town in a not in a positive way.
No, not in a positive way at all. And he hated the Clintons, absolutely hated the Clintons. And he was real tight with Mike Huckabee. He had been responsible for helping Mike Huckabee set up his media businesses when he first left James Robison, if you know who that is, and went out on his own. He was responsible for helping get Mike Huckabee named as the youngest ever president of the Arkansas State Baptist Convention, which was the largest and most politically powerful bloc in the state of Arkansas. And then from there, J. Cole helped him get elected to lieutenant governor, which is what enabled him to then become governor. Okay. So he owed J. Cole a lot. And J. Cole was like really, really pushing this Wayne Dumond is innocent conspiracy theory. And so that's why I believe Mike Huckabee was so keen to believe it and to work so hard to get Wayne Dumond freed.
Okay. So now out of the characters that you've mentioned so far, where does QAnon tie into this?
QAnon's much later, obviously. So this was taking place during the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Wayne Dumond was paroled in 1999. And basically, the conspiracy theories that were being used by J. Cole and then others, including on the national stage, to say that Wayne Dumond was really innocent and Bill Clinton was really just this criminal mob boss, who did all these horrible things. Those conspiracy theories were really kind of the heart of the QAnon conspiracy theory. That was what made me want to write this book, was that when Pizzagate happened, which Pizzagate was kind of the beta, the trial balloon for QAnon, people were just absolutely shocked that why would someone believe this about Hillary Clinton? Because if you remember Pizzagate, it wasn't just that Hillary Clinton was like sexually abusing and trafficking minors. There was like satanic rituals and cannibalism and just like all this craziness.
Drinking the baby's blood and all of that.
Yeah. and rightfully, most people in the national media were just like, how can someone believe this is just craziness? And I'm sitting here yelling, at the television or radio or whatever and going, no, you don't understand. These have been going around for decades. There have been people believing this stuff and passing it around for literally decades. And so it wasn't necessarily that Wayne Dumond started all of these things, but his case was sort of at the very beginning when they first started these conspiracy theories.
Right.
And his was the first case that I know of where these conspiracy theories had this real world effect that caused real harm to real people.
And I guess also as this story was probably building, it was probably gaining too much steam when like the rise of social media as well, and even podcasts too. I know even in your intro to your book, you actually refer to Alex Jones, who also didn't like the Clintons, so he threw some gas on that fire as well.
Yeah. So it first started, these conspiracy theories about Wayne Dumond and basically anti-Clinton, anti-Democrat, anti-leftist, really were first being spread around in the evangelical religious community. And I want to be clear that I know that not all evangelical Christians are in this, but there's a certain subset of the evangelical community that is very politically active. And that's what I'm talking about, is that particular community of people. And so it started out getting, preached on the pulpits. Preachers would record their sermons either on cassette tapes or VHS tapes and send them out. They would make flyers and hand them out at church meetings. A lot of religious people like Mike Huckabee, when he was a preacher, would have television shows on local television stations. They'd have AM radio talk shows. That was the way that these things got spread around before the internet, right? And so, and then the internet just like you said, threw gas on the flame.
Kaboom!
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Could you talk about like the murders of the other two women after the initial woman was killed?
Yeah. So he got paroled. Wayne Dumond got paroled in 99. He had to wait a little bit because no state wanted to take him. And one of the conditions of his parole was he had to leave the state of Arkansas. But he married this, once again, very church-going woman named Terry Sue, who lived in a suburb of Kansas City. And so now that he had this documented connection to Missouri through his new wife, Missouri agreed to, let him transfer his parole to the state of Missouri. So he moved up to Kansas City in, I believe, the summer of 2000. And 6 weeks after his marriage, his wedding to Terry Sue, he raped and murdered a woman named Carol Sue Shields. And it wasn't clear who her killer was at first because there was no connection with her and Wayne Dumond other than her boyfriend's apartment, where she spent a lot of time, was very close to a job site where Wayne Dumond was working at the time. But she had fought, and so she had some of his DNA under her fingernails. Using that DNA, they were able to exclude the usual suspects, the people closest to her. But then it was like, okay, well, who is it? So then it had to be sent to CODIS, which, as anyone who knows anything about true crime can tell you, that can take a really long time. It took almost a year, really. So during that time, Wayne was free to go about his life. And on June 21st, he raped and murdered another woman named Sarah Andrusek. The very next day, June 22nd, the DNA results came in showing it was Wayne Dumond who had murdered Carol Sue Shields, and he was immediately arrested. If those results had come back 24 hours earlier, Sarah Andrusek would still be alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like a tragic case of timing.
Yes. So tragic. And most of the time, if people know anything about this, which not a lot of people do, but if you know anything about it, that, people know about Carol Sue Shields because he was arrested, he was charged, he went to trial, he was found guilty, sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. while he was in prison, the other prosecutor was working on the Sarah Andrusek case and was fairly confident that it was Wayne. You know, there were just a lot of similarities in the MO, the victimology, you know, all that kind of thing. And, but, you know, Wayne was in prison for life. So the prosecutor probably wasn't, you know, in too much of a rush. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, Wayne died in prison before the prosecutor was able to bring charges against him for Sarah Andrusek. So Sarah's case often gets sort of left out because he was never charged for her murder. So, but she was definitely his last victim.
Is there a possibility that there may have been others?
There's always that possibility, but in all my research, I never saw anything that really stood out that it could have been him, because he wasn't that smart.
Okay.
Like, he tried to clean up the crime scene, but, you know, she had DNA under her fingernails. There were hairs of his on the bed. Like, he just wasn't that smart that he could have gotten away with much else. And he had a very specific MO. He would cut his victim's clothing off. He had done that with Ashley Stevens back in Arkansas. And so there was just nothing else that I found that fit that MO. So.
Okay. And these two women, they didn't have any connection with the Clintons. They were just people that he just came across and then he raped and killed them.
Yes, that's right. He had clearly been watching them for some time, because both crimes occurred fairly quickly after the people who had been in the home with them left. So he had clearly been like watching to see when the boyfriend or the husband or whoever left, and then he went over there, broke in, and committed his crimes.
Yeah, it's so unusual that, like you said, when Dumond's, I guess his wife was spreading all this conspiracy theories and just making stuff up, that somebody got behind him. I think usually you would think, as a lawyer, you might want to distance yourself from something like that, especially, you know, when there are political implications involved.
Yeah, but you know, these were people who their hatred of the Clintons blinded them to any logic or common sense. They were just, you know, Dusty was just so absolutely certain that her man was innocent, and J. Cole and Mike Huckabee and, you know, all these other people, they would just believe whatever about the Clintons. It did not matter. If you accuse them of literally eating babies, they would believe it. And we see that is still the case.
Yeah, we still hear the reverberations of that from, you know, years later. Because Pizzagate was in 2016, right?
Yes, that's
roughly
right.
About 10, you know, almost 10 years ago when you think about it. Yeah.
And Pizzagate, like I said, was kind of the trial balloon. There's just a lot of connections and a lot of similarities and overlaps that it very much looks like it was sort of the first test case or the trial balloon for what would later become QAnon.
Yeah. And then was there more that was built up about the Clintons after that, or was that like the primary story that came out? Do you know, was there anything else?
Do you mean QAnon?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the conspiracy theories about the whole Pizzagate thing. And
I mean, QAnon has basically taken every conspiracy in the history of the world and tried to tie them together. And I mean, they literally sell these posters that are like the diagrams of, you know, the deep state or whatever. And it's literally just like all these conspiracy theories and just arrows between everything. And it's madness. It's literally madness. But the Clintons and their supposed, you know, child trafficking, satanic cannibalism ring are kind of like what's at the center of it. It seems as though. Not that you can actually make any sense out of it, but.
It's interesting. The way you describe it, I'm envisioning like when you see like those crime shows when they have the maps and there are the thumbtacks and all the strings that are pointing in every different direction. That's what it sounds like. It probably wound up as just like this giant web of like, what the hell is going on here?
Exactly. It tries to take literally every single conspiracy theory and link them together into this big uber conspiracy. It's insanity.
How long did it take you to write this book?
Years? It took me years.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that this isn't a 6-month project, my friend.
No, yeah. I mean, I say it took me years, but that's because, I was not like just locking myself in a room and writing it. I was writing it. I was also, working my job. I was also making YouTube videos. And, it was kind of just one of those sort of like passion projects that I didn't really have any sense of urgency or anything about it. But then I got fairly close to finishing it up last year. And my publisher, Wild Blue Press, said, well, we'd like to get it out before the election. And I was like, okay. And I really, pushed and pushed and pushed and drove myself to a heart attack practically. But then just because of various things, logistical things, it kept getting pushed back until it didn't come out until last month. So all that stress was for nothing, but it's here.
It is here. And you know what, while we're saying that it's here, where can people find the book?
They can find it anywhere that you buy books. My publisher's Wild Blue Press, but of course, if you buy your books from Amazon, you can certainly buy them there. It's ebook. There isn't an audiobook yet, but the narrator, I believe, is just finishing that up. So there will be an audiobook available soon. I can't say exactly when, but it is happening.
And you're going to have to find a good Clinton impersonator, I did not eat that baby. Or something like that. I don't know. So do you have any social media sites where if people want to find out a little bit more information, where they can follow you?
Sure. I'm on Blue Sky and Facebook. Dr. Bartlette. On Blue Sky, it's just all Dr. Bartlette. And then on Facebook, it's D.R. Bartlette. So, but if you just look for Dr. Bartlette with an E at the end, you'll find me.
Well, now that you've got the chance to unwind a little bit after spending all this time doing this book, do you have another book in mind, or you want to give yourself a little breather?
I kind of do. And that's how masochistic I am, is that instead of taking a breather, I'm immediately like, okay, no, I really want to jump into this next book. It's another Arkansas-based thing. So I don't know if people are interested in this, but I feel like Florida gets a lot of attention for being like full of crazy people. And I'm like, no. Per capita, I think Arkansas might have Florida beat.
You got to move them up the charts there, Delaney. I think that's what it is. Yeah. I don't remember who said it, but it was an author, and he says, I hate writing, but I love having written. Which kind of gives, the process, the credit.
Yeah.
That
I really like the research part of it.
Yeah.
That's where and there's a thing, I think it's called researchification or something like that, where you end up doing so much research that you never actually get the thing written. And I was kind of starting to fall into that trap of just losing myself in all the research. But eventually I had to tell the story, and there's a lot of footnotes. Every single thing that I say in this book is backed up and footnoted. I want to be as accurate as I possibly can be. Like I said, I spent years researching this case. Some of it does draw from my own personal experience, but most of it is researched through good primary source material. So I hope that it tells a good story and is accurate without being confusing. Well, there's a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show and really setting the stage, especially for people who want to check the book out. So at least they have an idea of what's to come.
Yeah. There's so many characters, and that's why the whole first half of the book, it's like every character kind of gets their own chapter, because it's just insanity. Like every single person involved in this is insane. Like we didn't even go into the castration and the sheriff. There's so much.
Okay. So the name of the book is The Dumond Affair, How Lies in Politics, Free to Killer. Look for the author, D.R. Bartlette. But that's Delaney right here. And I thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Want to join the rebels of the Sherpalution? Follow us at Sherpalution on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky.
Thanks again so much to Delaney Bartlette, the author of The Dumond Affair, for coming on the show. That was so much fun. I'm really glad I had the chance to get to meet her and get to know her a little bit. Make sure you check out her book. We will include the link to buy the book on Amazon in the show notes. You know what the show notes are, that little thing that's by your podcast player. And as you heard me say earlier, this is our season finale, season 13, episode 25. So that only means one thing, Rebels. There's one more episode to go, and that is next week. And it's basically the season 13 wrap-up. That's what I like to do, where I get to acknowledge all the good people who've helped me to stay on here for 13 seasons, to bring all these great podcasts to you, along with acknowledging all the guests and all the folks behind the scenes, too. So I hope you check it out. We'll also be doing some Sherpa samples as well. And maybe even after that, I might even be sounding normal. I don't know. We'll find out. So if you are enjoying this, you know what to do. We are available on podcast apps everywhere, and also the Sherpalution YouTube page. About the Sherpalution YouTube page, I'm having a few issues, but I will try and get the episodes on here. For now, I will do what I can. And if there is a problem in the future, I will, of course, let all of you know. So I guess that's all I got to say. So we will see you next week for the season 13 wrap-up. And until then, we say, let me do the deep voice. Viva la Sherpalution!
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. I'm Mr. Bruce, and this has been a Sherpa-lu Studios production. Viva la Sherpalution!